Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Minato and Kushina hurts Naruto. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The day started out like any other day for Minato Namikaze. The rooster that his neighbor had crowed at the crack of dawn, which resulted in him falling out of bed and hitting his head. Not only was that bad, but when he had began his search for something to eat he was greeted by a white-haired man that was snacking on his favorite cereal. Blinking rapidly to try to make the said person disappear, Minato fell into a chair at his small kitchen table. "Doesn't someone look a little worse for wear?" the man stated through a mouthful of food. Minato respectfully pointed to a napkin, hinting at the fact that the man had a milk stain on the corner of his mouth. "I'm sorry, I was out late last night practicing." The white-haired man raised a quizzical eyebrow. "Is there a test today in class? Practicing is good, but you need to relax and behave like a kid once in a while." Blue eyes narrowed slightly as they focused on the worn-out tabletop. "But, I want to be strong. That way I won't have to lose the people I love. In order to do that I have to train Jiraiya-sensei." Jiraiya set down the small bowl as he looked at this young academy student that had caught his eye one day when he had been visiting. The young boy would not meet his gaze as he chewed on the inside of his cheek. This boy had gone through a lot in just the short few years of his life. Lost both parents by the age of 5, they had been murdered by cloud ninjas on their way to report to the ruler of the Land of Fire. They hadn't been ninjas, but they were very important political people that had been targeted by the village hidden in the clouds. "Minato." The sound of his voice seemed to snap the boy out of his thoughts and he gave Jiraiya a smile. "I still have lunch with some of the kids at school. And if everything goes good I'll graduate the academy next time there is a graduation test. But enough about me, how did your mission go?" Minato asked excitedly as he scratched his head and tried to smooth his unruly hair down. Jiraiya's laughter boomed through the room. "Oh, it was great. There was this really pretty lady I wanted to get with and it was clear she digged me, so I made some moves and then she..." Minato zoned out once Jiraiya started going on and on about the girl he had met during his mission. One would be surprised to know that even though he didn't pay close attention most of the time to his sensei, he still followed along and would be able to answer any questions he may get asked. Jiraiya was very animated and used his hands and arms to add to his expressions. Minato would smile and nod when it was appropriate to do so. He stood up and got himself a banana and a glass of milk, all while still listening to the older man. Jiraiya finished up his story and fell silent. Minato looked at Jiraiya when he had fallen silent. That only happened when Jiraiya was deep in thought, which wasn't often. Raising an eyebrow, Minato spoke, "Sensei? Is everything all right?" Jiraiya laced his fingers together as he leaned his elbows on the table. "There is going to be a few people coming here from the land of eddies. They are our allies, so I just wanted you to get ready for having new shinobi in the village. I think it's great that they are coming. But why? Did something happen to them? They are just sending some of their shinobi here, nothing to worry about. Wow, look at the time. Better hurry off to school, little one." Jiraiya exclaimed as he ruffled Minato's hair affectionately. Minato laughed and tried to duck out of his reach. It didn't work however, as Jiraiya had a long arm span. "Ha ha ha, Sensei, will you be able to train with me a little after?" Jiraiya's smile faded. "Sorry kid, but I have to report in to Old Man Third. Maybe another time. For now go to class and then spend some quality time with your friends." Minato ran his hand through his blonde hair. Spending time with friends wasn't something he was entirely good at. He tended to get along better with his kunais and shuriken. "It's fine, don't worry about it. Have a good day and try not to go peeking in the girls' bath." Jiraiya laughed as he placed his used bowl in the sink. "We'll see how the day goes. My day wouldn't be complete without seeing a pretty lady or two." He walked with Minato to the front door and placed his hand on Minato's head. "Have a good day, all right." Minato smiled up at his sensei. "You have a good day as well." The older man looked fondly at the boy in front of him. "This boy has unnatural talent. I'll have to talk to the Hokage about putting him through the graduation exam ahead of schedule. I think it'd be good to get him doing some real training. Plus it'd help get his mind off his parents. See ya around." Jiraiya said in farewell as he opened the door and exited. Minato stared at the closed door for a few minutes before slowly walking back into his small bedroom. Pulling his dresser drawer open, he pulled out a white zip-up hoodie that had a blue stripe going down both of the arms. He also pulled out his ninja pants and set to work getting dressed for the lonely day that was ahead. Once he had finished that task, he cleaned up his kitchen before walking out the front door and locking the door. Minato placed his key in his pocket as he calmly strolled down the street towards the academy. He was greeted by two other boys as the academy came into view. "Minato, how are you?" Bradley, a black-haired kid with glasses, asked. Minato smiled politely. "I'm doing great, how are you?" he chattered as they filed into the classroom. The teacher entered a few minutes after and called the class to attention. Minato took his seat and instantly fell silent despite a girl talking to him. She repeated her question and he gave her a sincere smile. "We can talk during break, okay?" The petite girl with brown curly hair blushed. "Oh, okay." She stuttered as she scurried to her own seat. He turned his crystal blue eyes to the front of the room where the teacher was talking to someone just outside the door. His curiosity was piqued as he wondered who and what the teacher could be talking to. Minato could have sworn he was blinded as the girl entered the classroom. He had to blink in order to see straight. It was as if he had just looked into the brightest sunlight he had ever seen. The redhead girl stood beside the teacher and switched her weight from her right leg to her left. "Class, we have a new student joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself?" The girl bit the inside of her cheek as a few students giggled softly. Opening her mouth, she took a deep breath. "My name is Kushina Uzumaki." The teacher nodded his head. "Today we are going to talk about what everyone wants to be when they grow up. Why don't you start us out?" Minato's ears perked up as he listened intently for her answer. She seems interesting. But in a good way. What will her answer be? All the students' attention were on her as they eager wanted to hear what the outsider had to say. Kushina's eyes revolved around the room as she analyzed the others. Fisting her hands, she closed her eyes as she bolted her answer. "I'm going to be the first female Hokage." The class, including the teacher, was stunned into silence by her rather loud outburst. Minato blinked a few times as he watched a small blush form on her cheeks. Getting to his feet, he smiled as his eyes closed and his right fist went to his chest, near his heart. "I want to become a great Hokage. Everyone in the whole village will respect me." Kushina Uzumaki eyed him as he declared to become the Hokage after she did. He doesn't look like anything special. He looks really girly to me. I doubt he'd be able to become Hokage." The other kids in class then began to stand up one by one as they told everyone what they wanted to become when they grew up. Kushina slowly ascended up the stairs and sat down at a free spot towards the back. Minato had watched her as she had taken her seat. "I never would have guessed she'd want to do something so great. I'm going to look forward to having her as a rival for the title of Hokage." The class proceeded and soon it was break time. The girl Minato had told to come back did, and soon he was having a polite conversation with her. Behind him at the back of the classroom, two boys were talking as Kushina stood there with a sour expression on her face. "An outsider like you doesn't have a place here. Why don't you take your chubby face and go back to your own village?" "Yeah," the second boy agreed with the first. The first boy that had spoken pointed at Kushina's red hair. "You know, with your chubby face and red hair you look like a tomato." The second boy laughed. "That's what we should call her from now on." Both boys laughed as the first, who was slightly taller than her and had brown hair, took a chunk of her hair in his hand. "This hair is so ugly and plain, no wonder why no one likes you. I bet no one liked you in your own village either." Something inside of Kushina snapped and her hand shot out and grasped the boy's wrist tightly. "I hate tomatoes, and I don't like my hair either. But that isn't a reason to touch it." In a quick motion she had both boys on the ground and was sitting on them, hitting their heads. "I'm going to turn you into smashed tomatoes." Minato, having heard the whole exchange, looked behind him worriedly. He was about to go help her when he realized she already had taken the matter into her own hands and was punishing them accordingly. A small laugh left his lips as he watched. She must have heard it because she ceased her motions and stared at him. "What are you staring at?" she accused as her deep eyes narrowed. His eyes shot open as fear shot through him from her tone of voice. He quickly looked forward and sweat dropped as he hesitantly looked back at her again. "She sure can take care of herself. No one will have to worry about her getting hurt. In fact, everyone should worry about those that dared to cross her path." Kushina's eyebrow rose as he looked back at her through the corner of his eye, only to quickly look away again. What is up with him? He's weird and so girly. I bet it'd be easy to take him out. The two boys she had been sitting on began to yell loudly, so she had no choice but to relent and let them go. As soon as she was off them, they took off and went to their seats. tears in their little eyes. Serves them right, soon they'll know not to pick on me unless they want a fight on their hands. Kushina wasn't surprised when the boys didn't tell the teacher what happened. It wasn't cool to be a tattletale apparently. Which was just fine with her since she knew the teacher probably would brush her off if she told him about what happened. She after all was an outsider. The clock struck 3 and everyone stood up to leave once the teacher dismissed them. Minato looked through the crowd of students until he saw her vibrant red hair. Kushina was scrambling to get out of the classroom before anyone could say anything to her. He watched as she succeeded and vanished from his sight. Slowly he got to his feet and walked out of the classroom. Instead of going back to his apartment he went to one of the training fields. Pulling out a few kunai he twirled them both effortlessly in one hand. Without hardly looking at his target he easily threw them and they embedded in the bark of 2 different stumps with 2 thumbs. Minato ran his hand through his hair as he tried to clear his mind so he could focus on his training. He found that today it was especially hard since a picture of a certain red-haired girl beating up on 2 boys stayed in his mind. A smirk came to his lips as he took a deep breath and focused his eyes on the 2 stumps that were a good distance in front of him. His leg muscles flexed as he prepared himself to flash to them. With no effort he blinked and the next instant he opened his eyes he was at the stumps pulling his 2 kunais out. He still had a long way to go to get better. So far he was one of the fastest in the academy, but it wasn't enough. He wanted to be the fastest ever. This is the first step I need to take in order to reach my dream. Minato stretched his arms as he walked back to the position he had started in. I wonder what Kushina's first step will be. I'll have to keep an eye on her, not in a creepy way but… He scratched his nose, I don't want her getting hurt. She took care of herself today but what about other days? Besides, she's intriguing. Who would have thought today would have turned into such an interesting day? I can't wait to see what else Kushina can do to make things even more interesting. With a smile on his face Minato turned his attention back onto his training. Life would never be the same for him now that Kushina Uzumaki had been introduced to his life. Minato counted his kunai to make sure he had enough. Satisfied that there was plenty he placed them back in his pouch, closing it with a click. Stretching his arms above his head he yawned. The morning had come too quickly. It was partly his own fault since he had stayed out late training the night before but he couldn't help it. He wanted to make sure that he was ready for the graduation test that was going to be this coming Friday. Getting to his feet he placed his pouch on his back pocket. It was a sunny day, perfect for more training. Soon his sandals were in place and he was out the door. The training field he frequently resided in was empty as he approached it. The sun glinted in his eyes as he focused them on the tree stumps that were directly in front of him. He grabbed a kunai from his pouch and twirled it around his middle finger. A puff of smoke appeared beside him but he didn't even blink. It was obvious who it was before he even spoke. I see you are out and about early. You must be getting a little nervous for the graduation exam that is approaching. Not nervous, I just want to be prepared. Minato stated matter-of-factly as he gripped the kunai firmly. With a flick of his wrist he sent it swirling towards the stump. Jiraiya blinked and suddenly Minato was gone. Bewildered he looked behind him to see if his student had managed to trick him. I'm over here. Jiraiya lazily looked over at the stumps. Sure enough Minato was there. Leaning against it twirling his kunai. Wow, your speed has improved a great deal since the last time I was here to see you train. Minato humbly shrugged his shoulders. You've been gone for a long time sensei. Yes I have, so it's been a few weeks since you met that new girl. How is she doing? She manages to get herself into trouble but she knows how to get herself right back out of it. Jiraiya laughed heartily. Ho. That's something I have got to see. Maybe I'll have to stick around. Minato shook his head as he walked back towards his sensei. Please don't do anything pervy. Pervy? Me? Are you kidding? I'm anything but pervy. A small smile played on Minato's lips as he listened to his sensei spout on and on about how what he did was research and there was nothing wrong with it. He's one crazy guy, but he's pretty cool at the same time. A bird chirped above them, causing them to both look up at the sky. Damn, I gotta go. Minato motioned for Jiraiya to go. Don't worry about me. I'll see you when you get back. With a departing nod Jiraiya vanished. Turning back towards the stumps Minato prepared himself to throw the kunai again. I have to be faster than what I can throw. Last time I almost didn't make it. I can't be even a slight bit off otherwise something bad could happen if I failed to catch it in time. Just when he was about to let it go, a cry filled his ears. Spinning on his heels, he faced northeast. What was that? The cry came again, and this time he wasted no time to spring up into the trees and to take off as fast as he could. The leaves whizzed past him as the sound of the girl increased in volume the closer he got. With one more jump, he was able to recognize the voice. Take that. Coming to a halt, he peered around the trunk of the tree and looked down at the ground. A glint shined from one of the boys that was on the ground. Upon closer inspection, he could see that the boy was wearing a leaf headband. So he's a genin. It isn't right for him to be acting this way. He should be showing his little brother the right way to handle things. He represents the village and he's doing a very poor job of it. Minato thought sourly as he watched the boy get up from the ground. It was apparent that Kushina had been able to land a few good punches to him. Seeing that made Minato fill with pride. No one could mess with her and get away with it scotch-free. His eyes widened as he predicted what was going to happen before it did. Instinctively he wanted to stop the attack from happening, but he also knew Kushina was more than qualified to handle this guy. It hurt him to watch as the boy grabbed her by the hair and pulled her to her feet. There they go again. Why is it always her hair that gets so much abuse? I don't see why everyone thinks it's so ugly. It's the opposite of ugly. Maybe I should go help her now. Just when he was about to jump down, he felt the change in Kushina's chakra. Instantly he stopped and watched as she began to pull herself forward. He could see the hair breaking with each step she took and see the pain that came on her face as she continued to press forward. Those tears, I don't want to see her cry. A pretty girl like her shouldn't ever have to cry. Minato thought as his hand clenched in anger. He didn't realize that he was upset until the bark on the tree began to crack from his own chakra. Gazing at his hand in puzzlement, he missed the last part of the fight. Peering down at Kushina, he realized that she had spoken to him. So you wouldn't even help me because I'm what? An outsider? Well, I'm getting sick of all this, you know. But shaking her head, she shouted at him again, not letting him finish his sentence before running off. Minato watched as she left, knew you could win. He sighed as he jumped to the ground and looked down the path she had just run. That was smooth. I don't know if I can ever get her to realize that I'm not out to get her. I'm not like the others. Minato turned in the opposite direction of the way she had gone and began to walk back towards the village. He was glad he didn't run into the two boys that had hurt Kushina on his way back, because if he had, he knew he wouldn't have been able to stop himself from giving them a good punch or two of his own. The village people were out and about, all eagerly trying to get their errands done. With his hands in his pockets, he passed Yamanaka flower shop. Veering back, he poked his head in the shop. Can I help you? A friendly woman asked from behind the counter. The last thing he wanted was to be in a flower shop, but here he was, walking in. She smiled brightly at him in understanding. Is there someone you would like to buy a flower for? Is there? It was then that his face lit up. Yes please, but I don't know what flower to give. Well, the lady moved from behind the counter and came to stand in front of him. What would you like to convey to this person? Convey? Yes, flowers can be used to say many things. They have a language of their own. Mrs. Yamanaka explained patiently. Their own language? Minato looked around the shop that was filled with all kinds of flowers. However, was he going to find the right one? Shopping for this kind of stuff is too hard. I'm not sure I can do this, he thought anxiously. Mrs. Yamanaka laughed as she placed her hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, I'll help you. How about we start from one side of the store and make our way around until you find the one you would like? Minato rapidly nodded his head. Anything was better than him trying to figure this out on his own. With another laugh, walked to one side of the store and began to explain to him what each flower represented. There were roses and they had a ton of different meanings since there were several different colors they came in. Right away Minato knew those weren't the flowers he wanted. It had to be something else. Something special. Well, if roses and lilies aren't the ones you want, then how about a sunflower? What does a sunflower say? Mrs. Yamanaka grinned as she picked one up. The sunflower is used to represent adoration. This person you are trying to buy for, are they someone you admire? Minato's eyes were glued to the sunflower as he nodded his head automatically. Now that he was looking at the flower up close, he knew that was the one. When Mrs. Yamanaka laughed, it broke him out of his trance-like stare. Well then, I believe you have your flower. Yes, he bowed, thank you very much. Moving over to the cash register, she retrieved a small vase and filled it with water. I'm assuming you will need one of these as well. She had the sunflower ready for him to go by the time he pulled out his wallet and handed over the amount that was needed. "Thank you," Minato said with appreciation as she handed him the flower. "You are very welcome. Please come again the next time you need another flower for this young lady." His cheeks heated up and he stuttered, "I. Waving her hand, she motioned for him to hurry along. "I'll be here when that time comes and I'll help you then as well." What does she mean by that? Ladies are nice but weird at the same time. I don't understand them. With a wave in farewell, he quickly left the shop. It wasn't like he was embarrassed to be seen with a flower, but he knew the rumors would start to fly if someone was to see him with one. So as soon as he neared a corner, he took and quickly flashed off, making sure not to harm the sunflower as he ran. The sun began to set as Minato sat in a tree branch, his legs hanging over the side. The sunflower was resting beside him, still looking as it did in the shop a few hours earlier. Touching his stomach, he swallowed. "I have a weird feeling inside of my stomach. It feels like butterflies, but why am I having this feeling? I'm so confused." Looking to the left and then to the right, he decided that now was as good of time as ever. Gripping the vase gently, he slid off the branch and landed smoothly on his feet. Using a quick walk, he neared the door and set the vase down beside it. His heart thumped loudly in his chest and he reached up and gave the door a good knock before turning tail and running back to the safety of his branch high in a tree. It took a few seconds before the door slid open and Kushina looked around. When it was clear that no one was there, an angry look filtered across her face before she glanced down and noticed the gift that lay at her feet. Minato watched as she bent down and picked it up. Her eyes darted to the left and then to the right before she leaned towards and it took a sniff. Once again she looked around and very timidly he heard her voice, "Hello? Is anyone there?" He froze and pressed himself harder into the tree. "Don't let her see me, please don't let her see me." When he didn't hear her voice call out to him again, he took a chance and looked back in her direction. She was still standing at the door, but this time she was smiling. Minato had never seen her smile so brightly before. As he sat in the tree branch above her and watched her smile, he made a decision. He liked her smile a lot, and he'd do anything in order to see her smile more often. The village was bustling by early morning as patrons walked to the small shops in order to buy the supplies they needed or simply wanted for the day. A small child ran through the crowds of people, laughing loudly as they held up an Enbu mask that they had been able to purchase. The child, with his brown hair falling in his eyes, nearly ran into Minato, who was walking slowly with his hands in his pockets. When the boy tumbled into him, Minato was quick to reach out and take a hold of the boy's arm as he was falling backwards. "Whoa, easy there." The little boy's eyes were wide as they looked up at Minato. "I am sorry." He stuttered nervously, obviously afraid that Minato would be angry with him for not looking where he was going. Minato ruffled the little boy's hair as he handed the mask back to him. "Just be careful, okay? You don't want to get hurt." Relieved that he wasn't in trouble, the boy smiled brightly and anxiously nodded his head. "I will, thank you." Taking the mask from Minato, the boy gave him a big wave before darting back through the crowd of people he had just come from. Putting his hands back in his pockets, Minato resumed his stroll. Today everyone had off from the academy since the teachers had a big meeting with the third Hokage about something important. His teacher hadn't given them any details since it apparently was something that only shinobi could know about. The class seemed more than thrilled that class was cancelled for the day. Minato, on the other hand, wasn't. With class being cancelled, it meant he had more time to be bored. Reluctantly, he continued to walk through the village streets. If he wasn't able to find something to occupy his time with, then he would head back to the training grounds to train some more. At least that was something he could always fall back on. A pack of teenage girls were gathered in front of the merchant shop as he neared it. They stopped talking as Minato walked towards them. One of the girls had long white hair that was tied back with a red bow that was to the side of her head. Her eyes seemed to gleam as they looked straight at him. Sweat rolled down his brow as a feeling of uneasy washed through him. "Oh no," he gulped as the girl covered her mouth as she whispered to her friend beside her. "What are they thinking? Older girls like this can be a little crazy." Minato didn't like the gleam in the other girl's eyes as she nodded her head, clearly agreeing with whatever the other friend purposed. His body flexed as he became alerted to whatever it is they may try to do. When they began to move in his direction, he looked around for a chance to get away from them without seeming obvious. It quickly became obvious that there was no way he could avoid them without being completely rude. The girls began to giggle as they drew closer to him. "Hey, what's your name?" the white-haired called out to him. When they got closer, all thought of being polite was shoved from his head as he darted in the opposite direction. He could hear their calls and chants as he continued to jog through the crowded street. "I'll never," he pivoted his right foot as he neared the corner, and because of the angle of his foot he was able to propel himself faster. Understand why Master Jiraiya enjoys girls when they get crazy and scary like this. I'm 9 years old and yet the older ones seem to still chase me like a lost puppy. With his speed he accidentally side-swiped someone and the bags they were holding began to fall towards the ground. With quick agility he was able to grab both the bags before they fell. "I am sorry about that, ma'am. I was trying to not hit you." His ears perked up when he heard their voices. "There he is. Hey, stop running, all we want to do is ask you your name." The girl yelled, exasperated. Handing the bags back to the lady he smiled apologetically at her. "I need to go, I'm sorry again." The lady was about to say something but was cut off as he zoomed out of sight again. "What a fast boy," she mumbled amusedly as she then began to walk again. Sweat glistened on his temple as Minato rounded another corner. Arms shot out and grabbed him, pulling him inside a shop. He was panting quietly as he listened for the girls to round the corner. He froze as they stopped near the shop entrance and looked around. Where did he go? Did you see which way he went from here? No, but he could only have gone one of two ways. I say let's split up. All right, signal for the other person if we find him, okay? K. The two girls then split up. Minato heaved a huge sigh of relief. That had been way too close. After he'd regained his breath he looked around the shop. He had been here before a few days earlier. Phew, that was a close one, wasn't it? Mrs. Yamanaka exclaimed as she straightened her apron. Minato spun around and looked up into this kind lady's face. Thank you for saving me," he stammered. Mrs. Yamanaka pinched his cheek affectionately. "No reason to thank me. I couldn't let you continue to be chased around by those 12-year-old girls, now could I?" He winced and tried to pull away from her politely. "That was a little scary," he admitted sheepishly, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She released his cheek at last and he rubbed at it with the palm of his hand. "I get the feeling that types of things will continue to happen to you, Goldie." "Goldie?" He peered at her curiously. "No one has ever called me that before." Mrs. Yamanaka went to a shelf and retrieved a water pail. She then began to water the flowers she had in the shop. Minato scratched the back of his neck before he began to follow after her. "I'm not sure what I'll do if that kind of thing keeps happening. It's frightening." He jumped when Mrs. Yamanaka began to laugh loudly. "Trust me, Minato, one day you'll enjoy having them chase you. Yes, right now they can be a little scary and strange, but soon that'll change." I don't see it ever changing. Girls are scary creatures that snap at you for the littlest thing, and sometimes you don't even do anything. They're too much trouble." Minato puffed as he folded his arms. Mrs. Yamanaka raised an eyebrow as she set the pail down on the wood floor. "Is that right?" "That's hard for me to believe." Her hand went in his hair once again. "Since you were just in here the other day to buy a flower for a girl." Minato tried to dodge under her arm, but when he looked up at her smile he faltered. "She isn't really a girl, not really. You should see her, Mrs. Yamanaka. She's really, well, she acts like a guy." "Does that mean you're going to tell me this girl's name?" With a tilt of his lips Minato easily dove out of her grip, a bright smile on his lips. "Nope. I guess that's something you're going to have to keep wondering about." Her hands went to her hips as she blew at her bangs that persisted on falling into her blue eyes. "Listen here, Minato Namikaze. I will get it out of you if it's the last thing I do. When I put my mind to something I always get it." It was at that point that Minato tuned her out. It wasn't that he meant to, it was just his attention suddenly got thrust in a different direction as he saw strands of red his peripheral vision. A lump formed in his throat and he had to swallow several times before the sensation would dissipate. His blue eyes turned and focused on the girl that was standing with her hands behind her back as she looked at one of the items that was on display outside a shop. The wind picked up gently, causing her hair to flow along with it. His feet led him to the side of the wall near the entryway, but he made sure to keep out of direct sight as he kept watching her. Mrs. Yamanaka stopped talking abruptly when she realized Minato's attention was taken away by the small girl across the street. With a knowing smile she moved to the counter. "So that's the girl that has caught his attention." Bending down to look in the small compartments she pulled a few containers out and searched through them before she finally found a few pieces of candy. Covering them with her hands, she made her way to Minato. Not wanting to disturb him from his watching, she gently took a hold of his hand that was closest to her. Turning his hand over, she placed the candies in it and closed his fingers around them. Looking into his eyes that were now looking at her with confusion, she patted his closed hand. "These will help keep you from being too hungry while you're out today." With a wink, she patted his hand again and went back to the counter. Minato's sweat dropped as he looked at his closed hand and then back at Mrs. Yamanaka. What did that mean? "I don't think I'll ever be able to understand girls," he concluded as he stuffed the candies in his pocket. His ears perked up when he heard Kushina talk to the shop owner that had just came out to greet her. "But it will be nice to have this candy. I can eat it while I watch to see how Kushina is outside of class." An image of Jiraiya peeping in the women's bath made him shake his head quickly back and forth, and not like that. "I'm not like Master Jiraiya, I just want to see how she is outside of school, nothing creepy about that." "She's leaving." Mrs. Yamanaka's voice snapped Minato out of his thoughts and he quickly looked back at Kushina. Sure enough, she was walking away with a small purchase in her hands. With a wave over his shoulder, he counted to 10 before leaving the flower shop to follow Kushina. Minato calculated the distance he would need to stay behind her so he wouldn't be noticed. It only took him a few seconds to come to the right answer. Hiding behind objects that were big enough to obscure him from view, he continued to follow her as she walked through the streets. It was when she neared the last shop on the street that a small gang of genin emerged from the barbecue shop. "There she is. She's the one I was telling you guys about," the boy with brown hair proclaimed as he pointed at Kushina with a small curled finger. Minato narrowed his eyes as he jumped onto a roof of one of the shops that was just next to the barbecue shop. "It's him again." His hands tightened into a fist. Didn't he learn his lesson? What did Kushina ever do to him? It was as if his thoughts reached Kushina as she came to an abrupt halt. Her gray eyes scanned the group of boys as she counted how many of them there were. Minato could see the gears inside her head turning as she formed a plan. He relaxed his fist slightly. There was no reason for him to worry about her. She was more than capable of dealing with these guys. Even so, he would keep a good eye on her, and if they gained up on her he would be there in an instant to help her. "She's the one that punched you, is she?" Another of the boys snarled as they folded their arms and glared at her. Kushina took a deep breath and stood up a little straighter, showing that she wasn't afraid. The boy that had his arms folded took a bold step towards her. "What gave you the idea that you could mess with one of our friends?" "He's the one that messed with me first. If he wouldn't have done anything to me, then I wouldn't have done anything to him," came her very easy reply. His green eyes narrowed drastically as he took another step towards her. Minato watched Kushina's expression closely to see if there were any signs of fear or uncertainty. Fire burned in her eyes as she pushed her hair behind her shoulder. "I wonder what else she'll do." Before his arm even shot out towards her, Kushina was already in motion. She bent under his arm easily and grabbed onto it. In one fluid motion she had caught her attacker off guard and had flipped him over. The breath left the boy as soon as his back connected with the ground, sending a burst of dust into the air. The boy hacked several times as he held his middle. Minato smirked and leaned his back against the wall. "Wow, she really is something else." Kushina clapped her hands together to get the dirt off. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere else to be." Pivoting on her heels, she began to walk around the group of boys that were now gathered around the green-eyed one she had just pounded to the ground. Sensing her chakra leaving, Minato quickly moved from his hiding spot to follow her. As Minato dashed after the red-haired girl, a man with long white hair smirked at the sight. "It appears the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Looks like I have some spying of my own to conduct." In a small puff of smoke he was gone. The sun began to set as Minato hid in a bush that was just to the left of the training grounds that Kushina was currently working in. He had spent the entire day following her around. He found it comical how she would slurp her soup when she ate. Usually girls didn't do that, so it was refreshing to see her do it. His eyes widened as he watched her throw a kunai. It whizzed through the air at high speed and embedded in a training post. She smirked at her handiwork before skipping over to it. Yanking it out of the tree, she tossed it in the air and easily caught it in her hand. It was evident that she excelled in weapons. "I wonder how her ninjutsu is," Minato thought as he watched her put the weapon away in her holster. Peering over her shoulder, she checked to see if anyone was headed in her direction. Minato looked around as well and saw that there was no one in sight. What is she going to do now? She took a deep breath before slowly moving her hands. It was obvious that she was making the signs for the shadow clone jutsu. Interesting, I haven't had the chance to see her do this one yet. Shadow clone jutsu. She exclaimed loudly with her eyes closed tightly. A puff of smoke appeared and then slowly dissipated. Opening one eye she looked around, before looking down at the ground. There on the ground was her pathetic shadow clone. It was limp and had only the whites for its eyes. Kushina groaned as she bent down and poked its cheek. Well, that was a failure. I don't know how I'm going to pass the test if I can't do this simple jutsu. My parents are going to freak. The clone popped, leaving nothing behind. Getting to her feet, she began to make the hand signs once again. I'm going to do it this time. I can't let this get me down. Minato watched as she practiced over and over again the shadow clone jutsu. Sweat was dripping down her temple as she heaved deep breaths. Wow, she's really something else. He thought as he twirled a leaf in his hand. She's getting close to having it down. I'm sure with another day like this one she'll have it. But, Kushina screamed and kicked at the ground. Dirt flew into the air and hit her in the face. She coughed and spit. This is so stupid. I don't like ninjutsu. She doesn't have the patience it'll take. I hope she'll be able to pull it off. It was at that moment after her outburst that she looked at the sky. Shoot, I'm so late. Her hair swung behind her as she quickly dashed out of the training fields. Minato emerged from his hiding spot after a few minutes. Stretching his arms above his head, he felt his back snap a few times. I've been in there for hours. He commented. Well, I never imagined you would be the type to hide in the shadows to observe someone. Minato's stomach sank at the voice that spoke behind him. Oh no, how long has he been there? You have nothing to say? I don't blame you since I've caught you red-handed. Jiraiya stated rather proudly as he put his back to a tree. I am not like that. Minato sputtered as he turned red-faced to his sensei. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow as he stroked his chin. Really? With what I was seeing, that isn't true. If she had gone to the hot springs, I'm almost positive you would have followed her. If his face could go redder, it would have. And not true. Jiraiya gave a hearty laugh as he watched the young boy fidget uncomfortably. Just be glad she didn't notice you. I'm sure she would have given you a bloody nose if she had seen you. Minato looked at the ground. I wouldn't have let that happen. Pushing away from the tree, Jiraiya reached out to place his hand on Minato's head, but the boy moved too quickly. I don't know about that squirt. I wouldn't. You'll see, sensei. One day I'm going to be the strongest and no one, not even you, will be able to sneak up on me. He declared, his blue eyes glistening with determination. Jiraiya smiled. I have no doubt of that. Now let's get you home. You need to shower. You smell like something the cat dragged in. Minato sniffed his sleeve and grimaced. Yeah, I had to hide in a dumpster one time so she wouldn't see me. It was a close call. Dumpster, huh? Wow, you must have run out of options. I did. The two walked side by side out of the training grounds. Minato continued to talk to Jiraiya as they made their way towards his small apartment. Jiraiya nodded and added his own 2 cents in all so he could embarrass Minato some more. This kid really could be the one, he could be the child of. The class was chatting loudly as students filtered into the classroom. Minato Namikaze sat in his assigned seat and absently twirled a pencil around his fingers. It had been a week since the time he had followed Kushina around town. He yawned as the others around him continued to chat endlessly with each other. It was clear they were all eager to get the day over with. Winter vacation was going to be upon them soon and they all waited anxiously for it. They were ready to have a break from being constantly at school and training. At least, most of them were ready for it. For Minato, it was just a reminder of the fact that he had no one to return home to, unless his perverted sensei was around instead of on a mission. He wouldn't hold his breath for that outcome, however. Exhaling loudly, he caught the attention of Kushina, who was sitting a row below from him. She turned her head and raised an eyebrow in his direction. Is there something wrong? Minato was taken aback by her inquiry. Never before had she spoken to him first. Usually the two of them exchanged words only after they were forced to spar against one another for class. Which usually ended with him pinning her to the ground, earning him the death glare from her for weeks. No, his answer slipped from his lips as he looked into her gray eyes. That was probably the lamest answer I could have given, he thought as he clenched his pencil in his hand after having spun it for the 20th time. Kushina shrugged nonchalantly, showing she didn't care either way. Then you better work on your mannerism, because with that loud exhale you did give the impression that you were bored or something, you know. Minato couldn't help but notice how often she said the phrase, you know, all the time. To most people that annoyed them, but he found it endearing. It was something she did without consciously knowing. The corners of his mouth turned up into a smile. It was one of the many cute things she did. When he realized that Kushina was still looking at him, he felt his stomach drop as she gave him a look of disgust. Fidgeting in his seat, sweat dripped down his face. Holy crap, she saw my smile and it totally freaked her out. What do I do? His blue eyes darted around the room as he tried to come up with something clever to say to cover up his tracks, or at least, save him. The homeroom teacher entered and called for their attention. Minato watched as Kushina gave him one last look from over her shoulder before she looked at their sensei. Hanging his head, he mentally groaned, that was not the best thing I could have done. I mean, of course she'd be freaked out with someone smiling at her like that. Curse it all. All right class, I have exciting news to tell you today. I just got back from talking with the other teachers and we've decided to mix things up a little bit. Instead of the normal assignments that all of you are used to this time, we're going to split you up into two-man teams and you will be given an assignment that you will be completing together. Every group will have something different that they will be trying to accomplish. He held up the small stack of papers that he was gripping in his right hand. I have the teams already decided and papers for both of you to use. This assignment will be graded a little harder than the rest of the assignments you've done because of the fact you will be working together. Because of that, everyone will receive the same grade, so make sure you give your all in this. Minato leaned his chin on his palm and watched with interest as the teacher began to hand out the papers. I wonder who will be forced to deal with me. Hopefully it's someone that can at least stand me. The teacher was to Kushina by this point and she took the paper gingerly in her hands. Minato watched her back as she scanned the paper. He froze when he saw her shoulders tense and time seemed to slow as she turned around in the bench to look at him. Minato slowly looked her in the eye and wished more than anything he could read her mind. It was clear by the look on her face that she wasn't happy about her partner, and with the way she was looking at him, made it obvious it was him. He got his own paper and glanced at the white page in order to look away from her gaze for at least a moment. Sure enough, the name right next to his was Kushina Uzumaki. The paper crinkled a little as he lowered it and brought his gaze back to her. Looks like we're partners. Yeah, are you sure you'll be able to handle this? I mean, she looked him up and down, almost as if she was seeing right through him. You don't look like you can handle much. Even though you can hold your own ground when it comes to training, I don't know if you'll freeze up out in the real world. Why don't you come out and say I look girly? I know you think it. He thought as he nervously cleared his throat. I promise I won't be extra baggage. I can carry my own. Kushina squinted her eyes at him and after a moment the look of worry left her. Holding out her hand for him to take, she cocked her head. All right, we'll see if you can handle this. For now we're working together, which means I won't leave your back uncovered. Minato took her hand as they shook on it. Thanks, and I've got yours. You better, you know. Glancing back at the thin sheet that was on his desk, the corner of Minato's lips turned downward. How are we going to be able to pull this off? I mean, assist a lady to the next town? This is like a mission for Genin level and we haven't even graduated yet. How did the teachers get permission to do an assignment like this? I'm sure a lot of you are concerned about the contents of your assignments. Don't worry, there will be a Chunin level shinobi traveling with you. However, they will be working in the shadows and will only assist you when they feel as though your lives are in danger. The Hokage has agreed to this assignment full-heartedly, so please, make sure to use what you have learned thus far in your schooling. Hesitantly Minato raised his hand. When his sensei nodded at him, he spoke in a soft but clear voice. You said we all have different missions. Does this mean there will be a chance we'll meet up with each other? Good question as always, Minato. No, each of you has something unique that all us teachers thought would best be suited to your skill levels. Is there any other questions? His green eyes looked at each of the students in the classroom. No one moved an inch as they all looked at the assignments. Good, now the days that are on the top of your paper is the day the assignment will take place. We are giving you guys a taste of what life will be like once you graduate. It's better for you to understand what you'll be getting into before you take the plunge. The bell rang loudly in all the ears of those in the building. With a farewell, their teacher gathered his supplies and left the classroom. Kushina got up and turned around with her books in her arms. Are you really ready for this? I really don't want to be stuck in this assignment with you if you aren't. Stuffing his supplies in his shoulder bag, Minato kept his eyes off her face. I promise I'm ready, and by the looks of it we'll be having our assignment in a couple of days. Kushina watched as the others in their class shuffled out and stayed quiet until it was just the two of them. I wonder if anyone else had a mission like ours. Don't you think it's a little advanced? That was the reason why she kept asking him if he was ready. She was nervous, it was obvious by the way her hands nervously clenched at her books. Minato bent down a little so he could put the strap of his bag over his head so it rested on his opposite shoulder. Sensei did say they went over it and only assigned missions they thought was to our skill level. Obviously they think we can handle it. But why not a 3-team squad? Why only a 2? It will be a 3-man squad. We'll have at least a Chunin level shinobi with us, remember? They'll just be hiding in the background to make sure we don't mess things up too bad. Minato reminded her as he began to walk down the stairs. She fell into step behind him, and when they reached the landing she walked beside him. I knew that. He chuckled at seeing her cheeks flush. Timidly he nudged her shoulder with his own. Hey, don't sweat it, and it was easy to miss. Our teacher didn't go over that part well enough, so it doesn't surprise me that you missed it. I'm sure others in the class missed it entirely and they'll wish they would have paid closer attention. Kushina smiled back at him. Well, next time I won't miss simple things like that, ya know. I'm sure you won't. Minato liked talking with her like this. It was nice to be able to talk to her normally without having to worry about her finding something he said mean. When that happened she'd lash out and punch the person in the face, which was something he desperately didn't want to have happen. Being with her had to come to an end. Once they reached the door, Kushina gave him a wave in farewell and scurried away before he could say anything else to her. Adjusting his strap on his shoulder, he began the trek back to his small apartment. Maybe this mission won't be so bad after all. I'll be able to talk to Kushina for longer than 10 minutes before she leaves and acts like we don't know each other. It'd be cool to become actual friends. The day of their assignment came faster than either of them realized. With packs on their backs, his blue, hers green, they set out with determination to finish the task with high marks. It wasn't long for them to reach the small neighboring village that their charge lived in. Minato looked around as they passed house after house. A lot of them were small and run down, but still left him with the impression that they were people that had good strong family ties. Kushina kept to herself mostly as they made their way down the street. There were a couple of times she'd look at something and say, "Gibbers," or something to that effect. Normally he would have commented about it, but he wasn't in the mood to get a punch to the gut. With a few more streets they came upon the main house of the village. It was built very nicely with painting that resembled some kind of tradition painted on the side that faced the road. Stepping towards it, Minato softly pulled on the string that was attached to the bell that was beside the door. It rang loud and clear, and it wasn't even a second and someone was pushing the door aside. The man that stood before them was in what appeared to be his mid-30s. His black hair was pulled back in a ponytail and a samurai sword hung from his belt. He studied them with his green eyes before motioning for them to enter. "You must be the young ninja from the Leaf. You got here rather quickly, I'm impressed. Now, there are a few things that will happen. I'm going to take you to my lord and he will explain the mission that we have for you to do. Once that is finished you will meet his grandson. You will be responsible for him every moment you are with him." Minato listened intently to everything the man was saying. Kushina on the other hand was whipping her head from left to right so she could take in everything that was inside the house. There were a lot of expensive-looking items that hung from the ceiling and resided on the desks that lined the walls. Weird that the village leader has so much valuables, but as we were walking here, his people barely had a roof that wasn't leaking. Men like this make me sick. Why can't they just share what they have in order to make everything better? I'm glad that the Hokage is different and our village doesn't suffer nearly as much as others do. Makes me sad that not everyone is as blessed as I, she thought sadly, her eyes finally looking at the man that was still talking to Minato. Reaching a room that was furthest back in the house, the man, his name was Makoto, knocked on the door. "Enter," a voice called from within. Minato shared a look with Kushina before they both entered the room with Makoto's insistence. Sitting in the middle of the room with candles about him was the head of the village. The purple robes he was wearing glittered with expensive thread. Sitting down on the small mats that were provided for visitors, Minato and Kushina waited patiently for the man to speak. Clearing his throat, his raspy voice began. The Leaf Village came to me and requested that I allow ninjas in training to complete a mission. I was hesitant at first, but I was assured I'd be given the best. Look at the two of you, I hope that's correct. I don't know what Kushina's scores were on the tests we've had, but I know mine were okay. I wouldn't say the best, but they were passable. Minato thought as he moved his fingers against the mat he was on. The job the two of you will have is to escort my grandson to the head capital of the Fire Nation. It is where the Fire Lord resides. He is to go to school there until he becomes of age to return to fulfill his duties. While you are on this mission there should be no problems, but I wanted ninja guards regardless. Will you promise to assist my grandson? And to also allow no harm to befall him? Kushina stayed silent, which was unusual. When it was clear she wasn't going to say anything, Minato spoke up. We will do everything in our power to get your grandson safely to the capital. The head of the village nodded his head, his black beady eyes closing. Thank you, the trip isn't far. It should take you a day there and a day back. I wish you the best of luck. Now, it's time for you to meet my grandson. Makoto, bring Alexander in. The door swished opened once again and a small boy about 5 stood in the entryway. This is my grandson Alexander. His homeland is across the waters from the land of fire and further. My daughter sent him here when it was time for him to be taught the duties of his lineage. Look after him. Kushina glanced over her shoulder at the boy with dirty blonde hair. His green eyes peered at her curiously and she smiled and gave him a small wave. Alexander looked at her for a moment and then gave her a smile in return. Alexander, these are the 2 ninjas that will be traveling with you. Catching the undertone of what the head was saying, Minato piped in, I'm Minato and this is Kushina. We promise to get you to your destination safely. Alexander studied Minato from knees to head. Minato could feel sweat trickle down his back as the young boy stared. Great, he gave a nervous smile. He probably thinks the same thing Kushina does. I really need to get strong fast so I can show everyone that their opinions of me are wrong. Then they won't look at me like I'm a sissy that can't do anything. Now that the introductions are finished, it is prudent that you begin your journey. Make sure to stay to the paths that are clearly marked. If you venture off into the woods you may be lost. Makoto advised. We will thank you. Minato replied politely as he got to his feet, Kushina doing the same beside him. The head of the village exchanged a few quiet words with Alexander. Minato and Kushina waited until Alexander bowed to his grandfather and then returned to their sides. His green eyes flashed with intensity. Let us go. We have a lot of ground to cover and I'd like to get there as quickly as possible. Sure, Kushina piped in before Minato could. It was the first time she'd really talked since entering this room. Alexander nodded his small head and walked through the open sliding door. The two followed closely behind him. Feeling perplexed by the way this small child had spoken caused Minato to contemplate just how hard it would be to live in a family like this one. And yet, as he watched Alexander hug one of the aides that took care of him, Minato was envious. How would it be to have someone to hug like that before he went off to school in the mornings? It would be wonderful. Feeling someone staring at him, he cocked his head to the side and caught Kushina studying him. When she realized she had been caught, her cheeks flushed and she quickly looked away. Okay, he popped his fingers, that was a little weird. She's never been the one looking at me, it's the other way around. I'm always looking at her. More advisors came into the room. They had a backpack that was filled with stuff that Alexander would need. They placed it on his shoulders and spoke to him of the importance of staying close to his protectors. Minato saw several emotions play across Alexander's face even though he fought to keep the emotions at bay. There was anger, fear, nervousness, and excitement. All emotions that were reasonable for someone of his age to feel. After they were satisfied that they had conveyed all their feelings, they moved to the side and allowed Minato and Kushina to lead the way out of the house. Sand kicked up as they exited onto the street. Kushina covered her eyes from the shining sun that was beating down on them. Well, let's get going. We don't want to be late getting you to the Fire Lord. Alexander seemed to be gazing at Kushina with new eyes. Minato frowned when he decided he didn't like the shine that gleamed in the boy's eyes. Great. Kushina ruffled Alexander's hair fondly and gripped her backpack straps. We'll keep you safe. He nodded his small head, his hair falling into his eyes and then away with the movement. I know you will. Inwardly, Minato was struggling with wanting to hit the kid upside the head and with rolling his eyes. It made him uneasy with the way Alexander seemed to be enjoying Kushina's lightheartedness. But this was not the time or place to worry about such things. They were on a mission and he was going to put all his focus into that. He could feel his mood change as he went into concentration mode. Alexander seemed to be able to feel the shift in his mood as well, because he looked over at him and frowned. The three of them traveled in silence for more than half the way. They didn't run into much trouble other than having to stop and help Alexander get a piece of wood out of his sandal. More than one occasion Minato had been able to hear and sense the Chunin-level ninja that kept to the trees. He stopped and looked behind him and up into the green leaves. Despite the Chunin trying to conceal themselves, he was able to see them clearly. His blue eyes locked with the brown pair before he turned around and kept following after Kushina and Alexander. I doubt they were supposed to be spotted at all. At least they are here to help out if we need it. The Chunin ninja swallowed and made a small note in the small book they carried. For one so young to be able to sense their presence at all was short of a miracle. The ninja smiled. There was a good reason to keep a close eye on Minato Namikaze, and it would be likely that he would change the entire Hidden Leaf village. Alexander groaned as they made it to the Fire Nation's front gate. Kushina looked over at him curiously. I thought you would be happy to arrive here, early to boot. The boy shook his head. I'd much rather spend more time with you. His answer made her smile and ruffle his hair. Tell y'all what, when I have some spare time I'll come and visit you, okay? I've wanted to visit the fire capital anyway, so this would be the perfect excuse to get out of the village. That made Alexander's countenance shine. Oh really? You'd come visit me? You bet. I never lie, y'all know. Minato gently placed his hand on Alexander's shoulder to get his attention. We've almost finished our mission, but it isn't complete yet. We need to escort you to the Fire Lord. I know. Alexander answered dejectedly. Kushina took his tiny hand and led him along with Minato close to Alexander's opposite side. They were stopped at the entrance hut, but with handing over a simple document they were allowed into the fire capital with no hassle. The rest of the walk was simple and didn't take them long at all. They now sat and waited for the Fire Lord to let them into his private study. Kushina pulled her backpack off and let it slid to the floor by her feet. With a deep breath she began to gather her red hair to one side of her neck so it was no longer covering it. Her cheeks were slightly red, showing her small amount of exhaustion. Even though the mission hadn't had any complications, it still had been a long trek. Minato's feet ached as he sat down on the bench beside Alexander, and beside him was Kushina. It was easy for him to see the exhaustion that Kushina tried to hide as Alexander turned to her and began to talk to her non-stop. With a small smile Minato got back up on his feet and told Kushina that he would be right back. She opened her mouth to reply but quickly shut it when Alexander waved his hand in front of her face so she'd pay attention to him. Minato moved quickly through the crowds of people just outside the Fire Lord's mansion. He knew it wasn't good to leave Kushina alone with Alexander for long, but there was something he wanted to do. He rapidly looked from right to left until he spotted what he had noticed when they arrived. It was a small stand that sold cold drinks. Rushing over he opened his wallet and pulled out a few bills. The man at the stand looked him over and then grinned. What can I get ya, young man? His blue eyes looked over the small menu that was attached to the wood with a nail just beside the stand. I'd like a cherry lemonade and a regular lemonade. And, he thought of what drink Alexander might possibly like. How about one of those popsicles, the lime-flavored one? Right away. The man began to make the drinks, and once those were done he pulled the lime-flavored popsicle out of the cooler that he had at his feet. That's 20 ryos. Minato gladly handed over the exact amount of money and took the drinks. The shopman was nice enough to include a small carrying case for the drinks so that way he wouldn't have to hold on in his arm. With a bow in gratitude Minato hurried back to Kushina and Alexander. They both looked up when he approached and shared the same look of surprise. Minato handed Alexander the lime popsicle and then held out the cherry lemonade for Kushina. I thought everyone could use something to cool themselves down with. I hope I made the right choices. I just had to go off my best educated guess. Alexander whooped with joy as he quickly unwrapped the popsicle and stuck it in his eager mouth. I like these just great, thanks. Kushina took the drink from Minato's outstretched hand and held it. She looked at it and let a tiny smile appear. Thank you. Minato nodded and then took his seat and began to drink his own lemonade. Kushina looked at the contents for a little bit longer before taking a sip. Her eyes closed in happiness as the taste hit her senses. It's my favorite. How did he guess? Maybe Minato isn't such a sissy after all. She continued to enjoy her drink, completely unaware of Minato watching her stealthily through the corner of his eye. He smirked as he downed the last of his lemonade. Get Kushina to smile without being in hiding, check. Now I just need to work on her talking to me more. After they had enjoyed their refreshing items, the Fire Lord came to greet them. There was a small exchange between the four of them, and then Minato and Kushina were given thanks and sent back on their way. The walk back to the village was just as uneventful as the walk there, but there was a change in Kushina this time around that had Minato puzzled. For once she wasn't refusing to talk to him. No, it was like now she was willing to answer his questions if he asked them. As they got to the halfway mark back to the village, the Chunin ninja that had been following them dropped in front of them. It caused Kushina to scream and pull out a kunai, but Minato easily placed his hand on hers and lowered her weapon, totally unfazed. The Chunin straightened and looked at the two of them. You two did very well. You should be proud of what you were able to accomplish alone on this assignment. Kushina, you interacted well with the client and helped make them feel safe and secure, a very good trait to have in Minato. The boy paused and looked Minato in the eyes. You were always observant and ready for anything to happen. You were able to sense me when Kushina could not. Even when you were talking with the others in the group, your eyes were always moving, taking in your surroundings. I will be reporting how well you did on this assignment to the Hokage as well. The Chunin grinned. The both of you made a very good team and did an overall amazing job. Now let's hurry back to the village to report this to your teachers. Kushina beamed and hurried after the Chunin up into the trees. Minato wasn't far behind them as he followed. It was surprising to get so much praise, but at the same time it made him happy. This was just the very first step towards his dream, to become the most respected Hokage. As per usual, time slipped away from Minato's grasp and soon snow had fallen over the village, casting it in a white puffy blanket. He blew into his cold hands as he waited outside of the dumpling shop for Jiraiya to show. They had made plans earlier that week to meet up since he had been away on a mission for a month. Once again he was late, probably because he was off spying on some unexpected victim. Minato lowered his head, his blonde hair covering his eyes from passerby's view. Master is always doing things that are horrifying. A sweat drop appeared as he remembered several times that he had been chased because of something his master had done with him present, and he drags me into the fray of the women's wraths. I hope he isn't in serious trouble this time. What are you doing out here alone? Minato's head shot up like a bullet and he spun on his heel to look to his right. The person he saw was the last one he thought would show. Tsunade, who was a member of Jiraiya's team, walked up to him. Her hand instantly went in his hair. It was something all grown-ups seemed to like doing for some reason. I thought for sure you'd be off with some little vixen that'd have your heart tied around their finger. Oh, of course not, Minato blubbered. Jiraiya-sensei told me to meet him here, and well, he's late. A vein throbbed painfully on her face. That means, he's doing something he shouldn't be. The young boy knew that if he didn't do something soon, that Tsunade's legendary anger was going to be tossed at his sensei. Crap, he bit his lower lip nervously. What do I do? What do I say to make sure she doesn't go off the handle in searching? His hand shot out and he took a hold of her wrist, which earned him an eyebrow raise from her. Why don't we go into the dumpling shop? I'm getting hungry and I'm sure you'd like to have some as well, right? Well, Tsunade tapped her chin with her right index finger. I would like some sweets. All right. Let's go in, but when Jiraiya does get here, I'm going to let him have it. Together they entered the small dumpling shop. Minato was grateful to get out of the bitter cold that hung over the village. Tsunade chose the booth they were to sit in and he slid in so his right shoulder was touching the wall. It was hard to sit under her steady gaze. Shifting in his seat, he timidly looked up into her eyes, wanting to show her that he wasn't afraid of her, even though in all truth, he was terrified. When she smirked, he felt the palms of his hands begin to sweat. I like the look in your eyes. At first, when Jiraiya told me he was thinking of becoming a teacher because of you, I didn't believe him. But now, as I'm looking at you, I think I see why he'd want to do that. He's been on the battlefield long enough, so it'd be good for him to take a break. Wait, Sensei is thinking of becoming a teacher? Minato's face reflected his puzzlement and Tsunade covered her mouth. Oh, he hasn't told you? Oops, well, the cat's out of the bag now. What's out of the bag? Tsunade looked up into Jiraiya's face. The fact that you're thinking of coming out of active duty to start training little kiddies. What are you doing here, Tsunade? The older man asked, his voice a little firmer than he meant it to be. I was passing by the shop and I saw Minato standing in the cold. So naturally I wanted to see what was going on, and come to find out you were the one keeping him waiting. What were you doing? She shot back. Minato sunk lower in the seat as the two adults continued to bicker back and forth with one another. They managed to get everyone's attention in the shop, which only added to his uneasiness. I can't believe this is happening. His horror intensified when his blue eyes caught a new person entering the dumpling shop. When the person's hood to their sweater was lowered, red hair spilled into everyone's view. Oh crap, no. Kushina Uzumaki was standing at the front desk. This was the worst possible time she could have come into the dumpling shop. Tsunade, you are being crazy. He jumped at Jiraiya's loud cry of aggravation. The outburst snatched Kushina's attention and her eyes looked over at the three of them. At first she was focused on the two adults that were both on their feet, their faces red as they shouted at each other. After she recognized who they were, her eyes landed on him. It took her a moment before she acknowledged him with a small wave. The wave caught Tsunade's attention and she abruptly stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes locked with Kushina's. Is that? Jiraiya glanced over his shoulder before lowering his voice. Yes, that's Kushina Uzumaki, they brought her over from the land of eddies. So she'll become. Shish, we aren't to speak of that. He reprimanded her gently. Become what? What is it Kushina will become? Minato looked back and forth between the two adults. By the look on both of their faces something wasn't right. Minato's eyes widened as soon as Tsunade pushed away from the table and began to make her way over to Kushina. What is she doing? Minato hissed. Jiraiya shrugged. With Tsunade you have to get used to not understanding what she's going to do. She's one of those people you don't want to piss off. But master, that's what you always seem to end up doing. A passionate smile tugged on Jiraiya's lips as he watched after his teammate. Yes, I know. Sometimes you do stupid things in order to get their attention. Minato looked away from Jiraiya doubtfully. Who would want to do the things he does in order to get that person's attention? She's scary, and could kill him or anyone for that matter. Tsunade walked right over to Kushina, who was desperately looking for an escape route that could get her away from this crazy woman as fast as possible. Almost being able to sense what Kushina was up to, Tsunade placed a hand on her shoulder. Now why are you here alone on a night like this? Don't you have friends that could come with you? Kushina sighed in defeat and looked up at the taller woman. I usually come here alone. I like the dumplings here. Plus, I like to watch the other people. So you're an observer, nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a very good trait for a shinobi to have. Thanks? Now, Tsunade took her hand away. Why don't you come over with the three of us and enjoy your dumpling with us? It's better than sitting alone, and I saw the exchange between you and Minato. I think he'd like it if you came. Huh? You think so? Kushina asked, surprised by the thought that the boy would want her around at all. All I do is treat him like dirt, so why would he want to hang out with me? Not to mention, yeah. Tsunade laughed. Duh. Does that kid look like one that wouldn't want you around? Following Tsunade's hand, Kushina looked over at Minato again, who was talking to Jiraiya, his blue eyes ablaze with seriousness. Her chest tightened suddenly and she was perplexed because of it. That never happened to her before. Maybe it was the stress of tests that they had just finished taking. I guess not? Minato is kind to everyone, so please come sit with us. Somehow she knew she wouldn't be able to get out of this one. When Tsunade had her mind set on something, it was nearly impossible to get her to change it. Kushina nodded her head and tripped over her feet as Tsunade took a hold of her wrist and hurried them over to the table. Look what I found. She's going to sit and have some dumplings with us, and then you can walk her home, Minato. Minato choked suddenly, which was totally uncool since he hadn't been drinking or eating anything. The man that towered over him laughed loudly and slapped his back. That's ungraceful, choking on your own spit. His cheeks heated up and he knew he was blushing. Kushina tilted her head to the side, not sure why Minato was acting all flustered. Tsunade pushed her into the booth and she quickly recovered from the shock of it and scooted to the inside. Jiraiya did the same to Minato, so the two of them were sitting across from each other. So you two are classmates? Tsunade inquired curiously. We've been in the same class since I came here. Kushina answered since Minato sat across from her silent. That's great. Minato's at the top of his class, so I'm sure he can give you pointers when you need them. Minato wanted to be anywhere but here at this moment. Why was Tsunade saying these things? Was she trying to get Kushina to hate him again? They had just started to get on level footing and now this was happening. She really doesn't need my help. Everyone looked at him since it was the first thing he'd said since they all sat down. Kushina is really great at what she does. Anyone would be lucky to have her in their team when it comes time to organize them. Tsunade studied the two of them before grinning from ear to ear. They would. I didn't mean to say that you weren't great as well, Kushina. I've heard a lot about you and I'm excited to see where you go. Thank you. Kushina replied reverently. It wasn't often she got compliments. Jiraiya exchanged a look of warning with Tsunade who ignored it. Turning once again to the two children she spoke, so, what are the plans for the holidays? Do you guys have anything fun going on? Kushina shook her head, just spending time with my family. How about you, Minato? Minato shifted in the seat, not much, I just do the same thing I've always done. Study. His answer made Kushina's eyes widen. What? You don't do anything else? There must be something. He shrugged, not really, that's about all I do. That's sad. This year you should do something fun. She announced. Minato gave her a smile, I think I might. The dumplings everyone had ordered came and they began to dig in. The two adults ordered sake and soon they were laughing loudly. Minato and Kushina both giggled when they began to say weird things. Grown-ups aren't very smart when they get drinks in them. Kushina observed. Minato agreed fully, no kidding, there have been a lot of things this big baboon has done when he's been drinking. Some of the things have been scary. Scary? I don't mean scary as in I fear for myself, no, I mean, he paused as he tried to come up with an example. Like one time he ran around my house wearing only a loin cloth. Things like that. Ew. Yeah, that'd be scary. Exactly. Rather abruptly the adult stood up. With red cheeks Tsunade pointed a finger at Minato. Now you walk her home, understand? I don't want to hear she got attacked, got it? Yes ma'am. Good, now you two better head home. Minato and Kushina promised that they would be on their way shortly. The two of them watched as the adults staggered out of the dumpling shop. When they were out of earshot they both started laughing. Pulling out his wallet Minato laid enough money down on the table. Wait, why are you paying? Isn't that the adults' responsibility? Kushina asked as she pointed at the green bills. They were both so out of it I didn't want to ask. Besides, I don't mind paying for it. I don't have a lot but I have enough for this. Wow, not only is he nice but he's responsible. I think my judgment of him that first day was wrong. Minato Namikaze isn't a sissy, he's amazing. Kushina's mood lowered as she thought about everything. Even though he was a great guy there was no way he'd want to really be friends with her. Therefore, she didn't need to be friends with him. Minato frowned when he saw the look reflecting in her eyes. She always got this way after they talked. What do I say to make her like that? I need to figure it out so I don't do it anymore. Shall we go? Huh? She snapped to attention. Oh? Yeah, of course. Taking the lead Minato began to trek into the snow. They walked in silence for a few steps and then it began to snow lightly. Do you like the snow? Kushina looked up into the sky. Snow, yeah, I do like it. Reminds me of home a lot. We always got a lot of snow when it was this time. Seems like this place does as well. Yeah, there are times when it's hard to get around places. I know. Back home it would sometimes snow so much that we couldn't get out our front door. I loved those times because it meant we got to stay home and spend time together as a family. She beamed as she started to think about the times she had had. Minato listened to her closely as she began to go into another story about some of the things she'd do with her family. It was nice to see her so happy and full of light. When he had a family someday, he hoped it'd be filled with the love she told him about. They were about to pass a shop before heading into the section of the village where her family resided. Lifting his hand up to stop her he smiled apologetically at her. Hey, wait here a second, I need to get something. Huh? Okay, just don't forget about me, ya know. I won't, he promised as he hurried into the small shop. Mrs. Yamanaka looked up from a book she was reading at the front counter. Minato? It's been a while since I've seen you in here. I know, I'm sorry about that. I was just wondering if you had anything here that I could give someone? With an all-knowing smile Mrs. Yamanaka got off her stool and moved towards the back of the shop. She came back with a red plant that had big leaves. It was one Minato hadn't seen before. This is a poinsettia. They are Christmas Eve flowers. I think she'll like it. Usually they come in bigger selections, see? She pointed behind her to the others that were indeed big and fuller. But this one is a special one. It's a lot smaller than the rest, but I think it's the most beautiful. Minato took the pot into his hands and looked at it. I'll take it, how much? Don't worry about it. You have a Merry Christmas and you come visit me on the day, you hear? I don't want you to not have a Christmas dinner. He grinned happily at the thought of having a nice dinner for once. I'd really like that. Is it really okay? Mrs. Yamanaka pulled him into her arms and squeezed him. Of course, you're my special friend. When they pulled apart, Minato gave her a grateful bow. Thank you so much. I better get going. Without another word he hurried out of the shop. He was slightly worried that Kushina wouldn't be waiting for him, but he saw her at the corner. Her hair was falling down her back and he could see her breath as she looked up at the telephone pole. Sorry about that. She had her mouth open as she spun around but shut it when she saw what was in his arms. He held them out to her, a smile on his face as he closed his eyes. Merry Christmas, Kushina. Kushina stared at him for a while before slowly reaching out and taking the plant from his outstretched arms. She brought it close and smelled it. It smelled just like the ones she remembered from back home, perhaps even better. As Minato put his hands in his pockets and began to walk again, she quickly fell in step beside him. What is it about Minato? Why can't I figure him out? They reached her house in no time and she still had yet to say anything. Minato was slightly worried about it, but he didn't mind. Sometimes Kushina didn't say anything, which was odd for her, but at the same time it told him she was thinking. She stopped and planted her feet in front of him. The flower in her arms matched her own red hair. Licking her dry lips, she took a deep breath. Thank you for the present. You're welcome. With a small unsure smile she began to walk up towards the big house. Minato was about to turn to go when her voice stopped him. Have a Merry Christmas, Minato. With a surprised look he glanced over his shoulder and saw her smiling at him. It was the same smile she had done when he had snuck flowers over to her earlier that year. But this time, it was directed solely at him. He raised his hand and gave her a wave before turning around and shuffling through the snow that was steadily getting higher. The holidays came and went, and before any of the students knew it, graduation tests were among them. Minato Namikaze closed his eyes and enjoyed the gentle breeze that brushed against his face, tossing his blonde hair in every direction. He wasn't nervous at all for the exam. He was prepared for anything that they would test them on. His master had been here earlier in the week and had given him some extra training in order to help him be even more prepared for what was to come. Minato was grateful that he had a great man like Jiraiya that was willing to help him with tasks like these. It made it easier for him when Jiraiya was around doing the things that his own father would have been doing if his life hadn't been cut short. Painful memories shot through him, causing his body to tremble. Holding his stomach and took deep breaths to calm the feeling of nausea that had hit him like a bag of bricks. I can't think of them right now. I cannot afford to lose my focus. I need to graduate and then the real work can begin. Straightening his shoulders he began walking again. His body moved on its own without his mind having to consciously be thinking about where to go. A figure fell into step beside him but remained silent. Minato knew right away it was Kushina. Ever since Christmas she had been acting strange around him, almost began treating him like she had before the mission they had gone on and the present he had given her. For a while it had concerned him, but after a few days he decided it wasn't good to dwell on negative thoughts. The two of them walked in silence. When they rounded the corner by the general store, Kushina liked her lips. I bet you aren't even nervous, are you? Minato shoved his hands into his pockets, not sure if he should answer honestly. No, not really. His answer didn't catch her by surprise. He could tell without even having to look at her directly. What do I say to her? It's obvious she is nervous even though I don't think she should be. From everything I've seen her do, she's more than ready for the test. She'll be one of the ones to graduate. What will I do? Huh? Her question caused his ears to perk up and he tilted his head to look at her. Her vibrant red hair fell in front of the sides of her face as she looked at the ground. It effectively made it so he couldn't see her face. If I don't graduate, what will I do? I came here to be a shinobi. If I am unable to become one, then what was the reason for coming to this village when I have a perfectly good one of my own? Truth was, even Minato didn't understand why Kushina had been brought to the village hidden in the leaves. He had his suspicions that Jiraiya knew, but he wouldn't tell no matter how many times Minato tried to trick it out of him. Minato spoke slowly, almost agonizingly slow, don't think you should worry about that. From everything I've seen in class you have a really good chance. Kushina didn't seem to hear his words. She continued to mumble under her breath. He was only able to make sense of a few words which were, stupid, you know, and even, terrible. The young boy wanted so desperately to reach out and place his hand on her shoulder to lend her some of his strength, but he held himself back. The last time someone had touched this girl they had been rushed to the hospital with a bloody nose. Arriving at the academy, he pushed the door open for her and entered after she did. The class was eerily silent as the both of them entered it. The feeling of fear filled the classroom, and Minato could have sworn he could see the physical evidence of that fear radiating off each person that was sitting rigid in their chairs. Kushina went to her own seat and Minato slowly walked to his. The teacher entered the room and began to explain what was going to happen during this year's graduation test. Minato half listened, his blue eyes on Kushina's frozen form. I know you can do it. Does everyone understand what they are to do? Minato's eyes flashed to the teacher. What was it they were going to be tested on? He had totally missed the teacher's words when he had begun to explain to the students what technique it was they would all be doing. When none of the students mumbled a reply, the teacher gripped his brown clipboard. Good, then all of you will wait here, and when the person beside you has returned to the classroom, that is your cue to enter the testing room. All the heads in the room nodded their understanding so they wouldn't have to open their mouths. Minato watched the teacher leave the room with Randy, one from the Nara clan, in tow. 10 minutes went by before Randy returned. He had the famous leaf headband on his forehead, displaying it with pride. He had done it, he was now a genin. Time seemed to tick slowly as one by one students left the classroom and returned. Soon it was Kushina Uzumaki's turn. When she stood up, Minato watched her shoulders square before she walked out of the classroom. Folding his hands together, he bowed his head. Please let her not lose her focus, which is the only thing that could hinder her now. She knows what is important, she only has to remember that. This time it seemed to take even longer for her to return. When she did return, she held the headband in her left hand. Minato was expecting to see her happy, but instead her face was pale. He got to his feet, about to go to her, but stopped when she flashed him a glare and then turned and left the classroom. Slowly he sat back down. What had happened to her during her test? She should have been so happy to pass, instead she looked scared. Minato's turn came and he entered the testing room. The teacher that had been teaching him sat at the desk, but what surprised him the most was Jiraiya was there also. He flashed him a big grin. Let's see what you have. If he had to admit to this old man that he didn't know what the test was on, Minato was sure he would have turned beet red. His teacher picked up his pencil and tapped it. There is a dummy in the corner. It is the enemy and your task is to capture it and restrain it effectively. And then from there you are going to go against me. Jiraiya cut in before the teacher could finish his sentence. Minato gazed at the old table they were sitting in. In all reality, this test was a waste of his time, but it was needed. Blowing into the palms of his hands, he went to work. It only took him a few seconds to have the dummy successfully suspending from the ceiling, bound tightly so there was no way it could escape. The teacher dropped his pencil and shot a glance at Jiraiya. I could barely see him. Jiraiya rose from his chair and walked around the desk. He barely had time to put his arms up in a defensive position before Minato was on him. His legs and arms moved fast in jabs and jibs. A smile formed on the older man's face as he fought back defensively. It was becoming more and more clear to him that this boy, Minato Namikaze, was destined to be the child that the elder Toad had told him about. The school instructor watched as the spar continued in front of him. This kid was on a totally different level than the other students. He picked up a headband and tossed it out into the middle of the room. It sailed through the air and the metal made a clinking sound as Jiraiya reached up and caught it. Minato was panting, sweat glistening on his forehead. You deserve this. The boy's eyes widened despite him trying to control his emotions. He took the headband from Jiraiya's hands. Thank you. He then quickly turned to the other man in the room and bowed deeply, and thank you for all your instruction. Without you I would have never learned all that I have. You deserve it. You will bring a big change to the battlefield. Minato gave a brief nod and then turned to Jiraiya. The old man wasn't looking at him, but he could see the look of approval from his profile. You may go. Minato bowed again and then left the room. He was happy that he had graduated, but his mind was mostly on Kushina and how pale her skin was. What happened to her? Will she be okay? The noise of the village filled his ears as he left the academy behind. He searched up and down the street but didn't see Kushina in sight or at the usual places she would eat at. I can only hope that she will be able to smile tomorrow. It was then that he decided he would do everything he could to find out what had happened during her test. Turning back around, he entered the academy to interrogate Jiraiya. Somersaulting into the air, Minato Namikaze dodged multiple attacks from his teammates and sensei. The young protege had been a genin now for almost a year, and in that year he had managed to grow well beyond anything a typical genin achieved. Jiraiya placed his hand thoughtfully on his chin as he pulled out of the fray to allow his other two students take a stab at Minato alone. If things kept progressing as quickly as they were, it wouldn't be long until Minato became a chunin and then from there a jonin. A cry wailed and his black eyes went to the boy that was clutching his knee, his pubescent face contorted in pain. Minato was instantly by his side, crystal blue eyes filled with concern. "Hiriko, are you okay? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw with that much force." Hiriko, a small boy with freckles and brown curly hair that hung into his eyes, gritted his teeth. "I'm okay. You really need to learn how to handle your own strength, Namikaze." Sheepishly Minato rubbed the back of his neck, his eyelids hiding his blue eyes. "I really am sorry about this. Here, let me help you." From there the exceptionally talented genin proceeded to place his hands on the injured knee, feeling for anything that could be broken. Jiraiya was going to step in to stop things, but he halted when he saw the concentration on Minato's face. Was it possible that he was interested in learning medical ninjutsu as well? Wouldn't that be something else? This kid. How am I ever going to keep him on his toes when he's constantly keeping me on mine? Hiriko grunted as Minato began to wrap a bandage around the hurt knee. "Ouch. That hurts, damn it. It has to be tight so that way nothing is jostled while we take you to the medical center. If I knew medical ninjutsu I'd give you the simple healing now, but I don't." Hiriko grumbled something under his breath and Minato in reply gave him a reassuring smile, and got to his feet once the bandage was wound tightly. All business, the boy looked at Jiraiya. He's ready to be moved now. Nothing felt broken, but swelling was starting to form. He'll probably be out for a week. Jiraiya stepped forward and easily swept Hiriko up in his arms. "I agree with your diagnosis. So, while Hiriko is healing up, we'll take a break from training." Hiriko isn't the only one that is tired, Naraku is as well. Minato nodded as he put the supplies back in his pouch. "And you are tired as well, sensei. I think rest is the best thing we could do at this time. It'll help our teamwork in the long run if we are all well rested and take the time to rest when it is needed." "Yes, that much is true. I'll take Hiriko to the hospital. You and Naraku head home and rest. When we hear how long Hiriko's knee takes to heal, I'll send word to you about when we'll meet again for training. And if a mission comes along before then, well, we'll have to ask another team if we can borrow a member." Naraku's black eyes narrowed in disgust. "Do we really have to do the mission with another person? Couldn't we just refuse the mission until Hiriko is better?" Minato looked over at Jiraiya, never the one to input his words when it would be better for the oldest member of the team to take the lead. Jiraiya sighed. "Naraku, we've gone over this before. If we get a mission we will take it. Don't bring this up again, do you understand? It is the way things are here in the village." Naraku folded his arms, his lips going into a tight line. A sense of unease and unrest flowed through the team as they walked away from the training grounds towards the village. Minato was silent the entire way, his mind constantly turning with what had happened during the training session. He hadn't meant to hurt Hiriko, it had just happened. "I need to get stronger, so that way I don't ever hurt those that are close to me. Right now my focus is still not where it needs to be. If I did this..." The genin began to think of all the ways he could improve on his focus and control of his strength that he didn't even notice when Naraku took the first street to the right once they were in the village. Leaving the three without a word, it was his sensei's voice that snapped him out of his thoughts. "Mrs. Yamanaka is waving at you. I think she's missed seeing you come in every day to visit with her." Minato's eyes went over his shoulder, since they had passed by the flower shop. And when he saw the blonde-haired lady standing at the entryway to her shop, he began to walk backwards. Raising his hand, he waved back at her. Normally someone would shout a greeting, but Minato had never been that way. He was mostly silent when it came to things like this, but he was slowly changing. And the reason he was changing was a certain red-haired girl. Hearing his sensei chuckling, he ducked his head and started walking straight. "I didn't see her. I noticed, you were off in your own world again. Want to talk about it?" Jiraiya asked. Hiriko unusually quiet in the man's strong arms. Minato licked his dry lips that were beginning to show signs of cracking. No, it isn't anything worth discussing. The older man grinned. How about Kushina? How is she doing? I don't know, been busy with missions and the same with her team. Plus, she doesn't really talk to me all that much anyway. Minato answered, not wanting to talk about the girl he couldn't stop thinking about. Jiraiya hummed his response to Minato's words. It was easy for him to see that the young boy harbored feelings for the girl. Feelings he probably didn't even understand at the young age he was. Perhaps it would be best to take Tsunade up on her offer to help bring the two kids together. It could be a good match. Sensei, is it okay if you take Hiriko the rest of the way to the hospital? I think I'd better head home. Sure, make sure to keep in contact, alright? I want you to come to me if you need anything, even if you need someone to eat with, got it? Minato tilted his head up so he could look at his sensei. It has been weird without having you crash at my place all the time. What are you planning on eating for dinner? Knowing you it'd probably be something strange. So why don't you come over and I'll fix something good? Jiraiya hooted at that. You want to make me dinner? I'd never refuse that offer. I'll be there around 7. Great, Minato exclaimed with a wide smile. He then took a couple of fast steps so he could look at Hiriko. Sorry again about your knee. If you need anything, I won't need anything. Hiriko cut him off, his eyes downcast, but thanks for the offer. Make sure to really rest, Minato. You worked too hard. Giving a small wave in farewell, Minato stopped and watched as the two continued on in the direction to the hospital. Work too hard? It was possible but not likely. All he wanted was to become strong and someone capable of defending those he cared about. With that goal, and the goal of becoming Hokage, Minato had never felt like he was overworking himself. He was just doing what needed to be done in order to achieve his dreams. A week had passed by with little to no surprises for the young genin. Hiriko had called him several times during the week to make sure he wasn't off training without the team. We need to work together, Minato. You can't keep going off on your own and doing things. You're already a powerhouse, what needs more focus is teamwork. Of course Minato knew that was true, so he had kept to his promise and hadn't trained. So what he had been doing instead was spending time with Mrs. Yamanaka in her flower shop, and in the library, studying ninjutsu and taijutsu. At the moment he was in the flower shop, sitting on a bar stool behind the counter that Mrs. Yamanaka had retrieved from the back room for him to sit on. Currently he had a strand of blue ribbon in his hand. Apparently he had to twirl it into some kind of bow, and he was stumped on how to do so. A sing-song voice laughed melodically. Do you need me to show you again? Meekly the blonde-haired boy nodded. If you wouldn't mind. I thought I understood it, but when I went to do one on my own. He blew out a breath in mild contempt. I obviously couldn't. I can throw a kunai with no problem, but this. Minato held the blue ribbon up that hung limply from his hand, is nearly impossible. Mrs. Yamanaka took the ribbon from his hand and sat down beside him. Moving so he'd be able to see her hands clearly, she began to loop the ribbon slowly. You never give up on things, so I know this won't be any different. See? That's all there is to it. She held the finished bow out to him and Minato took it. Furrowing his eyebrows, he pressed his lips together. I can see you doing it, but when I try to do it, I can never get it to work the same way. The middle-aged woman patted his shoulder and grabbed another ribbon, this one green. It takes practice, Minato, just like anything else you learn. Handing him a pink ribbon, she began to show him the steps, having him do them alongside her. The two fell into a comfortable silence as they began to make several bows. When the 10-year-old boy was on his third bow, he broke the silence. Are you worried about the war? It took Mrs. Yamanaka a moment to form the words to answer him. The boy studied her from the corner of his eyes, instantly regretting the question. She gave him a warm smile. Yes, I am. My husband is a ninja like you and he's gone a lot these days. I miss him tremendously and wish he didn't have to be gone so much. But I know he's needed to protect the village. I don't know why the Cloud Nation can't get along with us. Minato stated softly. Why do they constantly want to attack us? Because we are strong, and when one is strong, they are envied, and feared. Mrs. Yamanaka answered gently, her eyes softening. So, when one is afraid, that is when people do horrible things. Minato stated, not at all questioning his reasoning. It made sense. When he was afraid, he was going to do everything he could to protect himself. And if he was afraid of what could happen to those he cared about, It made him all the more determined to protect them. But if there was a way to keep his loved ones from being harmed, and stop himself from fearing for them, he'd take it. Yes, it is human nature to want to protect the ones we care about, even if it means hurting others to do so. The flower shop owner said sadly. As long as there is love in the world, there will be hate. It's like the yin and yang symbol, we need both to survive. Both of them, Minato mumbled, his hands making another bow without his mind focusing on the task. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the red-haired girl that walked past the shop in trance, her eyes trained on the ground, her training clothes stained and dirty. Minato's eyes snapped open, his heart suddenly lurching in his chest. Bolting upright in bed, he looked out the window that was beside the bed. Listening intently, he focused on the noises in the night air. Mostly all he could hear was the hammering in his own chest. Then the noise of the alarm filled his ears like drums being beaten in the silence. Dread seeped into him as he quickly scrambled out of bed. It was the signal that all able shinobi report to the Hokage's residence. Something had happened. Something bad. He could feel it as he strapped his sandals on and tied his headband in place. Flashing out of the apartment, he hurried to the Hokage's residence. There were several other shinobi there when Minato arrived, one of them being Mrs. Yamanaka's husband. The blonde-haired man with his hair in a ponytail acknowledged Minato with a nod. Minato in return did the same, and went to stand closer to the front so he could hear the third Hokage clearly. Anbu surrounded the Hokage but moved aside when he stepped forward. The young man with his brown goat spoke. One of our own has been taken from the village early this evening. We were not made aware of it until one of my Anbu went on patrol and noticed the disturbance at the Uzumaki residence. Minato stepped even closer at hearing the family's name. Uzumaki. That was Kushina's home. The one that has been taken is Kushina Uzumaki. It is imperative we retrieve her. She has unique chakra, and that is precisely why the Cloud want her. The Cloud took her? Minato looked up at the moon that was high in the sky. There were several dark ominous clouds in it as well. Not good. If they didn't hurry and find her soon, she'd be lost forever. One of the shinobi raised a hand. The man seemed to be around Jiraiya's age. Why are we going out of our way for her? It's possible that they have already crossed the border. It may be futile to act now. It will be. Minato hadn't realized he had spoken until every head turned in his direction. If we continue to stand here arguing about what to do. Adults tend to think too much about these things. I for one will go after her. I will find them before they reach the border. The group around him laughed loudly. You are only a genin, there is no way you'll find her if we cannot. The third Hokage smiled. Minato Namikaze is correct. As adults we do think too much about the situation placed before us. For this instance we will take his advice and we will strike back before we lose our comrade. All of you are charged with searching for Kushina Uzumaki. Do not let them cross the border. Everyone chanted their compliance, and when the Hokage raised his hand they all leapt away, Minato faster than the majority of them. Minato had followed with some of the older shinobi, but when it became clear they were having no luck he turned his head in another direction. It would be a long shot since it was not in the direct direction the Cloud would take since it'd add several more hours, but it was worth the look. He turned to tell the others but saw that they were gone. Grunting in annoyance he jumped into the trees and headed in the direction. I have to find her, I can't let her fight this on her own. It isn't like the other struggles she's had until now. This one I can step in on, because this time they have messed with the village. They have messed with me. Grabbing a branch of a higher tree he flipped up and landed on another branch further up. His blue eyes were cold as he scanned the area. Kushina is strong, but this fight isn't one she can win alone. There was a few broken twigs on the branches of the trees in front of him. Good, it was a sign he was going in the right direction. Glancing back behind him, Minato knew he should go back for reinforcements, but there just wasn't the time for it. A few minutes could result in them crossing the border or not. No, it was just him and he'd have to be the one to pull this mission off on his own. Taking his pack off his hip he opened the bag and quickly double-checked the supplies he had. 5 kunais and 2 smoke bombs and even a light bomb. Some tripwire, he could do it. As long as there wasn't more than 5 of them he'd be fine. The likelihood of there being more than that was slim since teams were usually of 4-man cells to make them more efficient, and this was a stealth mission to the T, so they weren't likely to stray from the normal setup. Minato put his pack back in place and made sure his headband was tight. His blonde bangs mostly covered the leaf symbol, but the edges of it could be seen. He had nothing to hide. One day he would be the most known ninja, starting with this night. Eyes set in determination, the leaf genin swung to the next tree, and from there followed the tiny traces that the cloud ninjas left behind. Must be Chunins. I can't imagine Jonins leaving trails like this. He stopped, suddenly seeing that no more clues were left behind. Looks like they are smarter than I thought. They purposely led me here. Which means... He spun to the right and backtracked for a while in search for something else that could lead him onto the direction they had taken. That was when the red strand stuck out in the grass and dirt. If one hadn't been looking, they would have completely overlooked it. But not him. He could never overlook it because it was a beautiful color, the most beautiful he had ever seen. Falling from the trees, he picked up the strand. Sure enough, it was Kushina's hair. She must have pulled it out in order to leave evidence that she had been there. Gripping it tightly in his hand, he looked in the direction it led. This way would take them at least 2 hours more to reach the border, since they would have to backtrack quite a bit in order to get there. He had time, he could make it. Running forward, he found another strand of hair. Kushina was leaving a trail. "You are amazing, Kushina. I knew you'd find some way to let us know where they were taking you." With a smug grin, he quickened his pace, knowing that he would soon gain on them with the help Kushina was providing. Minato Namikaze continued to pick up strands of hair that Kushina Uzumaki of the Uzumaki clan left behind. If the others had managed to come in this direction, they probably would have missed the trail altogether. After 20 minutes, figures could be seen in the distance. A smaller figure was in the middle of them, protected on all sides. Kushina. Adrenaline coursed through the genin's veins as his eyes scanned the surroundings. They were still in the land of fire. This was his backyard. He had the advantage. Flashing over to the one in the back, he easily took him out with a swift kick to the head, effectively knocking the man unconscious. From there, Minato gracefully moved through the men, knocking them unconscious as he went. The last, however, realized what was happening and quickly jumped into the trees, hiding in the vast leaves. Pulling out his kunai, the boy held it firmly in his hand. This cloud ninja had taken someone precious to him and had almost made him lose her completely. There was no forgiveness for that, and Minato was going to make sure he never had the chance to repeat the act. Flying through the air, Minato did a flip as he pushed off a tree. With the added speed, he was able to reach the cloud ninja from behind. Without a second thought, Minato plunged the kunai into the man's neck. Blood gushed from the wound, almost falling onto Minato's clothes. Luckily, he moved quickly enough that it only splattered on his sandal. The ninja fell from the tree with a loud crash. Birds sailed into the air, having been disturbed by the loud noise. His first kill. The cloud ninja was the very first person he had ever killed while on a mission. The normal reaction would have been to get sick with the sight and the thought of killing another human, but for Minato none of those feelings came. Instead, he felt nothing. There was a twinge of guilt, but nothing beyond that. This was the way his life was going to be. Being a ninja meant sacrifices had to be made, and choices. There were going to be times when one had no choice but to take another's life. That's what it meant to be in war. Minato didn't notice anything else around him as he jumped in front of Kushina, who had a vacant look in her eye as she kept trudging along, moving one foot in front of the other. Wetting his lips, he spoke gently, "You're safe now." His words slowly seeped into the girl's brain and she looked up at him. Minato smiled encouragingly at her as he saw the life slowly come back into her face. However, when her eyes rolled to the back of her head, the boy nearly panicked. Running over to her, Minato caught her in his arms. "Easy now. I got you." Unwinding the rope that had been around her wrists, he jumped into the air, the rope falling carelessly to the ground below them. Kushina was wide awake now and she was blubbering about being heavy or something to that effect. Minato chose to ignore her until he landed on the top of a tall tree. "Why you? But why?" The red-haired girl fumbled with her words, her voice cracking from lack of water. "I couldn't let them take you." Minato answered simply as if it was the most logical thing in the world. The girl furrowed her eyes, "But you never helped me before." The leaf genin almost laughed out loud but held it back. "That's because all the fights you had until now I knew you could win by yourself. But this dispute is between villages, therefore you don't need to do this alone. That's why I came." Kushina's eyes fell to his left palm where the strands of her red hair blew in the gentle wind. Minato followed her gaze and explained, "Your hair is beautiful, so I noticed it right away." He smiled down at her, "I'm glad I was able to find you. Without your smart thinking I'm not sure I would have made it in time." Pushing her hair behind her ear that had moved with the breeze, Kushina muttered, "You're the only one that came?" Smile fading, he nodded, "Yeah, the others looked for a while but they all searched the normal routes. I wasn't convinced they went that way, so I came looking in this direction." Kushina said something else under her breath, but he wasn't able to catch it because another gust of wind hit them. Tightening his hold, he looked in the direction of the village. "What do you say about heading back home? I'm an outsider." "No, you aren't," he argued. "Doesn't matter if you came from another village, now you live in the Leaf Village. You are a part of us." His words seemed to stir something in her because her cheeks flushed. "You really think so?" "I know so." Determination glinted in her eyes and she looked up at him. "Then let's return home. I'm sure people are worried about you, you know?" Minato chuckled at the phrase he had come to know was one of her trademarks, "Everyone will be happy to see you." Kushina poked his shoulder impatiently. "Then what are you waiting for? Let's get going." "Yes, Minato said as he stepped off the branch, lunging them both into the darkness of the trees once more. The line for the dumpling shop extended all the way to the end of the street. That was to be expected since it was the grand opening of the sweet shop, and naturally all the children in the village stood outside anxiously yearning to taste some of the dewy goodness that came from dumplings. Among those students was Minato Namikaze, who had just passed the Chunin exams at his sensei's insistence and now held the next rank of ninja, putting him a step closer to his goal. Hiriko bumped Minato with his shoulder. "Hey, look." Obediently Minato turned his head in the direction his teammate had instructed with a bob of his head. Coming up the street in ninja gear, even though they all were on leave, was Kushina Uzumaki. Her vibrant red hair was held back in a high ponytail, but two long strands were left out to accent her face. Lately it seemed she had been trying to fix herself up more. Primping was the word Jiraiya had used. "I don't know why she thinks she has to do that," Minato thought as he stuffed his hands in the pockets of his jeans. "She's always been beautiful the way she is." Blue eyes met gray and Minato raised his hand in acknowledgement. A wide grin spread over Kushina's face and she picked up her pace. At seeing her smile, Hiriko gasped and whispered, "I never thought I could think she was cute." But her smile. Minato stuffed his hand back in his pocket and didn't vocalize his response. Things had changed between him and Kushina since he rescued her several months ago. She seemed to have warmed up to him and couldn't get enough of spending time with him. Not only did they eat together for lunch, but they also started training together when they weren't with their teams. It was a nice change from the coldness that was her usual reaction towards him. "Minato." Kushina's cheeks were rosy from the jog she had broken to reach him. "Good morning, Kushina." He grinned at her, happy she had noticed him. Her arms went behind her back as she twisted her foot on its heel, her eyes glistening with excitement. "I didn't think you'd be out here for the dumpling shop. You like sweets?" "They're pretty good." That made Kushina giggle. "Yeah, they're pretty good. I'm glad they're opening this shop. I used to come to the owner's house in order to ask for some." Minato smirked. "That sounds like something you'd do. I've had her cooking once before and she's really good. Doesn't surprise me that she decided to make a shop all of her own. I'll be coming a lot, ya know." "Me too." Kushina gasped and poked his shoulder. "We should make it like a weekly thing we do together." "That would be so great, don't you think?" Hiriko's breath caught in his throat, which caused Minato to look at him from the corner of his eye. It was a normal reaction for him to be surprised that she was offering Minato this. If it had been a few weeks ago, she would have never asked him to do something like this. In fact, she wouldn't have been here talking with them. "I think that's a great idea, let's do it." "Really? Really? Yay." Kushina threw her arms up in the air and did a little dance, not at all caring who saw her making a fool of herself. The line moved and the group of teens moved with it. Minato made room so Kushina could stand in line with them and together they laughed and talked as they waited until it was their turn to sit in one of the booths. Soon enough the time came and the three slid into the booth, eager to finally get their hands on some of the sweet treats. Kushina rubbed her hands together excitedly. "I never thought we'd be here." "No kidding, I thought the line would last forever." Hiriko agreed, adding to Kushina's sentiment. "So you've been training?" Minato asked, nodding his head at her ninja gear. Kushina glanced down at her attire and then grinned back at Minato. "Of course, I have to catch up to a certain blonde-haired boy I know. I want to be able to beat him at his own game." Game? Hiriko asked. Minato chuckled. Yeah, we've been having small competitions here and there. Last time it was kunai throwing and she didn't exactly hit all the targets I set up. You cheated. Kushina huffed. You make the targets way harder than I made yours. They were the exact same. No, they weren't. Yes. No. Minato sighed in defeat, knowing there was no way to convince her otherwise. When she got like this, it was hard to know how to handle her. So more times than not he'd let her win the argument. It was easier that way. A lady walked over and took their order and then shuffled away to give it to the person who would prepare it. Hiriko smacked his lips expectantly. I can't wait to get some of this stuff in my belly. In no time the order was brought to them and all three dug in. They all moaned in bliss as the sweet taste entered their taste buds. This is amazing. Kushina cried out. Hiriko piped in. Minato simply ate his dumpling in silence. It was true, they were good. In fact, they were one of the best things he'd ever tasted before. Totally worth the wait they had to do in order to get them. Kushina blinked at Minato. You haven't said if you like them. The boy jumped and nervously smiled. They are very good. You should express yourself more. Kushina mumbled thoughtfully. Minato kept smiling. I'll try. Good, because I don't like to always wonder what you're thinking and feeling. Hiriko chuckled, but that's how he's always been. If you don't like it, then you probably shouldn't be his friend. Kushina gasped. That would be rude. No, I wouldn't stop being his friend because of that. With enough practice I know he can change. Haven't you heard that people don't change? Minato is different. Yeah, and the sun doesn't shine. Hiriko muttered as he took another dumpling from the stick it was on. Kushina huffed. Whatever. Let's not fight. Minato added as gently as he could. I promise to try to work on my communication skills. See? She tapped Hiriko with her newly emptied dumpling stick. He can change and he will. Hiriko rolled his eyes, and as soon as his last dumpling was finished he got to his feet. This was fun and everything, but I need to get back before my mom freaks out. I'll see you tomorrow, Minato. Minato raised his hand. See ya. The two watched as Hiriko left, and once he was out of sight Kushina sighed. I thought he'd never leave. Minato laughed. Why? Because his negativity was getting on my nerves, ya know. I don't like people like that. It's much better to see the good things. So, Minato leaned towards her. Why are you wearing your ninja gear? I thought I answered this already. Come on, there has to be more to it. Minato insisted. If you had a day off like this normally you would steer clear of those clothes. Kushina lowered her eyes to the wooden table. I had a meeting today and I thought it would be best to wear these instead of street clothes. A meeting? She nodded. Yeah. A meeting at the Hokage residence. Minato gaped at her, his mouth hanging open. She giggled and used her index finger to move his chin back up into a closed position. Why are you so shocked? Because not just anyone gets invited there. What happened? Minato asked. What is going on? There has to be a bigger reason why she was called there. Kushina tapped the table nervously with her finger. Can we go somewhere else to talk about this? I don't want anyone else overhearing. Sure. Minato got to his feet, the rest of his dumplings still on his plate. Let's go for a walk. Kushina eyed the food. Aren't you going to finish those? Nah, they aren't important, you are. Her head snapped up and she looked up into his blue eyes. Minato smiled down at her, feeling his heart constrict at the look of surprise that came over her. Don't be so surprised, Kushina. I'd drop anything for you. A small smile played across her lips now. I know. Then, he extended his hand to her. Come on, let's go. She took his hand shyly, suddenly very conscious of how his hand felt in her own. The two left the dumpling shop and walked towards the stone faces that were of the Hokage. Kushina kept her face down as they walked, not saying anything. Minato tried to not think too much about it, but it was hard for him to do. She wanted to know what he was thinking all the time, so it was only natural he wanted to know what was going on in her head as well. Time passed and soon they were walking up the stairs that led to the small clearing that was atop the stone faces. Minato? Kushina sat down beneath a tree and pulled her legs to her chest, her chin leaning on her knees. There's something I want to talk to you about. Minato sat down beside her, his attention devoted to solely her. What is it? He watched as she chewed on her bottom lip. She's nervous. Is it something bad? Could it be with how she reacted after her graduation test? I found something out that I haven't told anyone about. And, well, she blushed, her eyes glancing to the left, away from him, nervously. I've wanted to talk to you about it since the day you rescued me but haven't gotten the courage to do so until now, ya know? The Chunin placed his hand comfortingly on her shoulder. You know I'm always here for you. You can tell me anything you want and I'll do all I can to help. Promise you won't tell anyone else? He nodded solemnly. You have my word as a leaf ninja. With that reassurance the redhead took a deep breath. I was told not long after I got here that I was brought here for a purpose. A purpose? Kushina leaned her head to the side so she could look Minato in the eye. A single purpose. You know the first Hokage's wife took in the nine-tailed fox, right? Sweat dripped down the back of Minato's neck as he nodded ever so slowly. Yeah. Leaning back with her palms on the ground now, Kushina looked up at the blue sky. White puffy clouds were scattered throughout the blue expanse. That's what my purpose is. Wait, you mean you're gonna be? She nodded. I'm going to be the next one to hold the nine-tailed fox. And, her eyes fell to her ninja sandals. I'm scared. It's close to time now when I'll have to go through the ritual. Minato was on edge. When is it scheduled? In a few weeks, not quite sure when since they have to make preparations. I'm guessing it'll be at the beginning of the week though. The third Hokage is eager to get it started since she doesn't have much time left. Dumbfounded, the blonde looked out towards the village. You're going to be a Jinchuriki. Does that make you think less of me? The question caught the ninja off guard. Why would you think that? I'd never think such a thing. You are amazing, Kushina, and this doesn't change it. In fact, now you're going to be even more amazing because you'll have the 9 tails inside of you. That's a huge responsibility. One I'm not sure I want. Kushina confessed. It's hard enough being who I am. To add that, I'm not sure I'm strong enough to handle it. You are. Your sealing jutsu is amazing and I'd be honored to learn it. The Uzumaki clan is so powerful and you guys have amazing stamina, practically you're invincible. The girl began laughing, which made Minato relax. If he had been able to make her laugh, then he had succeeded. As long as she could laugh, she'd be okay. I wish that were the case, ya know. That'd be awesome. Laughing continued but stopped when a hand went to her cheek. Her eyes widened and she looked into Minato's blue eyes. I'll be here for you every step of the way. If they'll let me, I'll be a part of the sealing process. You aren't going to be alone in this. Gray eyes brimmed with tears and one by one they began to fall. Minato scooted closer to her and wrapped his left arm around her shoulders, bringing her into his side. I mean it. More tears fell and the girl sobbed and turned so she could wrap her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of it. Her thoughts were on the moment when she had talked to the first Hokage's wife. A single sentence filled her head as she held on to this friend of hers that had somehow come to mean the world to her. We must fill ourselves with love first. Thank you. Kushina managed to choke out in between sobs. Thank you so much. Minato moved his other arm so he could embrace her fully. His eyes closed as he leaned his head against her own. Don't thank me, it's an honor, really. I would do anything for you. Now I can show that to you. That's all for now. If you enjoy it then please like, share and do comments.